This tutorial covers the situation where you have a note that keeps sounding when you're not pressing any buttons, or also it could be if your instrument feels like you've suddenly lost power, and especially on the push notes, if you notice that you're pressing a lot harder to try to get the same volume, or you're using a lot more air in the bellows. This is all an indication that you have a stuck button. In the first case, if you're hearing just a single note, it probably means that one of the buttons is just not completely coming back up, or perhaps the pad is off center and air is leaking around the side. In the second case, where you're just feeling like the instrument's weaker, you're not getting much power, this will be a very noticeable thing if it's happening. That would mean that the air button is the one that's sticking. So the first step would be to, well, actually, before we take the instrument apart, one quick type of fix you can try is just to stir the button around on the end against the felt. There's felt that lines each of the buttons, and you're just trying to compress the felt like a little bit. You can sort of just wiggle it around. You can use a decent amount of force to do this, and sometimes that'll just bring it back. If you're hearing a good thud when you let go, then you probably are okay. But if not, maybe you have one that's not really making any sound. That could indicate that the button's not actually coming back up all the way. So if that does not fix the problem, you want to take off the 6 end bolts, open the instrument up, and you need to get to the action board. The action board is where all the levers are. On this instrument, this is a Noel Hill model. This one is still being built, but typically there would be a screw on the bottom under this tape here. The tape won't be on your instrument, but you would pull out that screw as well to open it up. If you have our standard size instrument without adjustable handbars, that will be the same way. There'll just be a long screw that goes through the bottom. If you have our small instrument, there'll be no screw there. You can just lift off the top right away. And if you have our adjustable handbar instrument, there'll be no screw on the bottom, but there'll be 2 screws here that you'll need to take off in order to lift the end off of the instrument. Alright, so once you have figured out how to get to the action board, there's a number of things you're going to want to try to loosen that button up once you've identified the problem button. And the first will be, this is similar to what we did with the button in the instrument. In this case, we're going to just say that the air hole is the bad button. So what you're going to want to do is take a 3/16 inch drill bit. You can put it right through and kind of just do the same thing. Press it all around, stir it, use a decent amount of force, and just kind of rub it all around till it's opened wider. Then you can put the end back on, kind of listen for that thud type of sound when it bottoms out. Alright, if that doesn't seem to fix the problem when you put the instrument back together, you can try to burnish, and this is something actually you should do at the same time. You want to burnish the felt that is inside the button, the red felt there. You can do that by kind of holding the pad down and just rubbing it back and forth a bit. Try not to put too much pressure on the button, or you might actually lower the height of the button, but just kind of keep going back and forth till it kind of moves smoothly on the lever, that it's not getting hung up. Sometimes humidity can cause the felt to swell a little bit, and it can cause it to hang up on the lever. The same with the felt that's in the end plate. That can swell up a little bit with humidity and cause problems. Alright, so if that doesn't fix the problem, the next thing you're going to want to do is, actually this could be the first thing you do, is look for debris. Sometimes just like a little tiny bit of debris might be stuck under the pad and keep it from closing all the way. So just make sure that there's nothing underneath. Open it up, just look, make sure there's no crumbs or whatever could have possibly fallen in there. And also make sure the pad's intact too, that the pad hasn't delaminated and fallen apart. This one looks good. Make sure it's closing all the way around. That would be another thing. If you notice that it was sort of off-center a little bit, air could be leaking through. You might have to bend it a little bit to get it back in place. But just make sure that the entire surface is closed, so there's no air leaking through. Okay, now say you still are having trouble. Another thing you could do, if the button feels particularly loose, you can try to tighten up the spring. And here's how you would do that. You can do it 2 ways. First, you can just leave the spring connected into the wood. It's just pressed in, and you can try bending it open a little more like this, so that it comes to rest at a greater angle than before. If you can't get enough doing that, take a screwdriver, slide it under the part that's in the wood. It'll just pop right out, and you can try to just open it up. You might need a pliers to hold it, but you could open it up a little bit more, and that'll give you more pressure. And then what you do, you just stick it back in the hole, take a screwdriver, press it down, it should go right in, and then take your screwdriver and push it back under the arm. Now it has a little bit more pressure. Still having problems? Take the spring off. Check to see how smoothly the button goes down. And if you feel it just really has a lot of drag on it, if you have our adjustable action, this is the one that has the screw on one side and the nut on the other side, you can loosen the whole assembly up a little bit. Let me grab a wrench. What you want to do, this is a 3/16 wrench. Most of our instruments have the 3/16 size nut on the back, and you should have gotten a wrench with your instrument. Some of them, the early ones, have a 5/64 inch. I think it's 5/64. No, it's 5/32 size wrench. So you might have a slightly smaller wrench. Anyway, you want to hold the nut on the back. Take the screwdriver. Loosen the nut first, and then slightly loosen the screw. And tighten the nut again, and then test to see how loose it is. In this case, I have it a little bit too loose. You don't want it to make too much of a clicky sound, especially if it's not an air button. The air button, it doesn't matter as much, but on the other buttons, you don't want the clicky sound, so I'm just going to tighten it up a little bit here. It's a little too tight. A lot of times you have to just kind of go back and forth until you get just that right amount of feeling. Just a little tiny bit of friction. Not much, though. Not much at all. I'm going to go just a little looser on this one. Okay, that should be good. Make sure that nut is tight on the back when you're finished, or it'll just, the screw will either eventually become all the way loose and fall out, or it will tighten up against the lever. Most likely that is what will happen. Okay, so we got it back. That's pretty much the things that cause the buttons to stick. If you're still having trouble, you can contact us, but give these different techniques a shot. And when you put the instrument back together, make sure you've got all the buttons clearly coming through the holes before you put it down. And then line up. You'll either have an R for right side or an L inside the reed pan. Line that up with where the logo is on the instrument, and start all the screws with your fingers. Make sure they're all going in before you tighten down, and then tighten around the instrument, but not all the way. Get them all about the same degree. I like to go every other one first. These are not all the way down yet. You'll tighten every other one, and then you'll tighten the in-between ones, and then you'll finally tighten them all down. And that should do it. Thank you for tuning in.